What's up, Rangers fans? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are having a great start to your day. I know I am, because we're in for a great episode here at Rangers Review. Myself alongside Stat Boy Steven. You guys know the drill by now. We'll be taking a look at the past 3 games for the Rangers over the past week, our stances on them, how they fared, the positives and negatives, everything in between, and what's ahead for them in this upcoming week of games as well. So as always, make sure you stay all the way until the end of the video for all the details and all our thoughts on these games and so much more, and Vitaly Kravtsov's debut, which is so exciting in itself. But if you guys ended up enjoying this kind of Ranger content and want to see more great Ranger content like this, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, share this video with your friends, put on the notification bell, all those great things. Thank you all so much for the countless support, Rangers fans. Now let's get right into today's episode. All right, what's up, Rangers fans? Welcome back for another episode here at Rangers Review. What an eventful week this was, past 3 games in particular for the Rangers, because our last segment, we stopped right around the first of 2 games against the Capitals again. So overall, a strong week, and I do believe that you were correct with your predictions, or at least close to. I felt that you were optimistic. If we go back, I think you said 2-1. But before we get into anything today, Rangers fans, I hope you all have had a happy Easter or whatever holiday you may be celebrating today at the time of recording this. If it does come out, then great. If it comes out the following day, then happy belated Easter. But outside all that, Steven, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. And you know, for me, it will still be Easter tomorrow, because in most European countries, we have what we call first Easter day and second Easter day. It's Sunday and the Monday.
Interesting. I
don't know. Is that a thing in America too, where the Monday after Easter is like a day off?
Well, it could definitely be a day off. Yeah. So, it's hard for me to read just because it's not like I'm going into work or class tomorrow. Right. So like, yeah, I honestly don't know off the top of my head, but I feel that is very much the case in certain areas, just probably not for everywhere. But
yeah, but it was an interesting week. Sure. Yeah, 2-1-0. Who would have thought? Or 2-0-1.
2-1. Yeah, I believe. Actually, I think we were both wrong with predictions. Again, I'm probably getting confused because we do these each week.
You need to write it down, and then
I do need to write it down. Because I'm being too lazy now looking back on your guess. Episode. But I think, if my memory's not mistaken, I think I was I 1-1-1 or 2-1? Either way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay. It doesn't matter.
It's not that important. It's not like we're playing for something. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just, it's fun when you're right every once in a while doing it. But again, a very eventful week for the Rangers indeed. And I must say, you know, we have to just start off this episode before we even get into the recaps by just giving credit where credit's due. And I think that David Quinn is definitely deserving of getting some credit here. So let's just kind of do a little, just quick summary on it in a nutshell before we do the game recaps of, you know, we've been harping on Quinn a lot, basically the entire season, but especially the past month plus. When Knoblauch came in, it seemed like a brush of fresh air to the players. And you could tell that in their performance for sure. When they were losing, really didn't feel like that they actually lost. Like, these were all games that they were deserving to win, and they didn't really have their head hanging down when they lost. You know, they seemed like that they were in fact doing a solid job. And when you score, you know, multiple games, gain 9 and 8 goals against the Flyers, it's always a great thing too. So since then, however, since Quinn has been back, this team has looked really more so in sync like during Knoblauch's time. It hasn't been the exact same, but you have the biggest thing that I think we have pointed out is the lineup construction. The biggest gripe that I've had all season long, outside of numerous things that bothered me with this current coaching staff, is the lack of having chemistry and comfortability with these lines and actually building these players' relationships, which are naturally going to help them perform. What have we seen this past week? We saw some toying with, I believe, in the second period of one of these games, but for the most part, these lines have been rolling out the same each and every period. And that's really important to me, because while ice time, we can definitely give a gripe about that, power play construction, how that's still looking, and even utilization when we get into overtime, all those things we can definitely nitpick for sure as fans, but give credit where credit's due. He has actually been very stable with the lines, and that's probably been the biggest issue for this club this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as you know, and as the viewers and listeners know, I've been harping on this for the last couple of weeks, where the Knoblauch era, as short-lived as it was for only a week or two, has really highlighted some of the flaws in maybe not Quinn's coaching, but in the way this team was coached. I think it goes a little bit further than just David Quinn, but as the head coach, he is responsible. So, and yeah, with Knoblauch behind the bench, Quinn was still responsible. It was still him deciding who plays. He still made the lineups. But there was still a difference. You know, whoever is behind the bench makes a difference. And I gave this example a couple of weeks ago, and I gave this example again on Twitter this week. When I go on vacation, my team reports to someone else, to my temporary replacement for 2 weeks. Even though I'm still in charge, it changes how they perceive their instructions, how they perceive what they are told to do.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with David Quinn. It's just that it's a different person and people respond differently to different people. So despite Quinn being in charge, what happened on the Knobloch was something, it highlighted something. And for me, the biggest takeaway from that 2 weeks with Knobloch behind the bench was how fresh the players looked, how full of confidence they were, because they weren't being demoted after they made a high-risk play.
The micromanaging wasn't nearly as relevant.
Exactly. And I have to give credit to Quinn for changing that. I've noticed this in the last couple of games, and people say, "Oh, it's easier when you're ahead or when you're leading in the game." That might be true, but in the past, David Quinn was tinkering with the lines even if we were up 2 or 3 goals. So that's not a reason. The reason was that Quinn was just so eager to try and spark something every time something happened, whether we conceded a goal. I remember David Pastrnak scoring from the blue line, which was a fluke goal. Nobody did anything wrong there. It was just screened well, and the puck went in. And immediately we saw people being demoted to the 4th line and other like 4th line players being promoted to the 2nd or 3rd line. And it didn't make sense to me. But the last couple of games have been refreshing. When I watch the Rangers play in the 3rd period and I see the exact same 3rd line and the exact same 4th line on the ice, that makes me happy. Yes, it's not perfect. You know, we can argue about the actual time on ice. That could be a little bit more balanced. But I will take the wins where I can get them. And this is a huge improvement for me, because I think more important than ice time is having the same line mates when you go out on the ice. Because that's how you develop chemistry. That's how you develop certain plays. That's how you develop confidence, by being on the ice with the same players. You see it with Kaapo Kakko. He's on the ice now with Panarin and Strome. And regardless of the fact that Panarin and Strome are better than Hedl and Lafreniere, it's the fact that he's playing with the same 2 players every time he steps on the ice. Mm-hmm. And that breeds some confidence. You know, he knows what to expect from his line mates because they're always out there together. And we also need to understand that after the team has a power play or after the team has a penalty kill, you will see some different combinations. Like yesterday, we had a power play where Panarin scored. By the way, his first goal, amazing awareness to see Ullmark down and not hesitate and just shoot the puck. After that power play, you saw a line of Filip Hedl, Kaapo Kakko, and Pavel Buchnevich. And the reason Buchnevich and Kakko played with Hedl for a shift is because their 2 line mates, in both cases, Kreider and Zibanejad for Buchnevich, and Panarin and Strome for Kakko, were on that power play. So you have to sort of balance it a little bit so that when Kakko and Buchnevich go to the bench after 45 seconds to a minute, they can go out there on the ice with their line mates again. So you will see this discrepancy, if you will, after special teams. But as the game progresses, and then when you have like 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes of continuous 5-on-5 play, I didn't see any tinkering with the lines. And the way to sum it up is that David Quinn has put the blender away. And that is a huge win for this team. And yeah, okay, I hope we will maybe work on the time on ice a little bit, you know, if we have a game where we are up 4 goals, that we give a little bit more minutes to the 3rd and 4th line, because you have that buffer then in the score line. But having them play with the exact same line mates, I think is a really good signal of what has changed since Quinn came back from COVID. The other thing I'm really happy about is that when Kravtsov came into the lineup yesterday, that it was Phil DiGiuseppe coming out of the lineup. This is nothing against Phil DiGiuseppe, but I think he was the logical choice to take out of the lineup after what happened in the last couple of games. DiGiuseppe was on the COVID list. He battled COVID, and you could tell that he wasn't really 100%. You know, he had a bad penalty in the first game against Buffalo at the end of the 2nd period, I believe. or at the end of the first. It was at the end of one of the periods.
Yeah.
And it was a bad penalty. And that's when I knew, okay, if Kravtsov is playing on Saturday, it should be Giuseppe coming out of the lineup. Also because Julien Gauthier, since he came back from being a healthy scratch, has been a completely different player. You know, he's been a net positive. He's drawing penalties. He's creating scoring opportunities. It was only fair for Gauthier to stay in the lineup. And then Kravtsov comes in, plays 10 minutes.
Oh, wait. Before we even get there, I just want to backtrack a little bit on the game.
No. Okay,
I want us to do a full deep dive kind of on Kravtsov.
Let me quickly finish this.
Okay.
And then we'll go into the whole Kravtsov thing. But Kravtsov comes in, plays 10 minutes, like on the third line, decent. And the lines we ended the week with, I think should be the lines moving forward. I think there's a good balance in the first line, the second line, the third line, the fourth line. And unless we have some suspensions or maybe injuries, I would like to see how this team can progress with the current lineups up front.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's a perfect segue now, getting into just the quick game recap, guys. So as we touched on a little bit already, but yeah, Kravtsov, we're going to talk on plenty here shortly because I have a lot to say about him. But going back to game 35 for the Rangers against the Capitals, monster win for the Rangers. Igor Shesterkin played on his head. He played on his head all week, might I add, and we'll get to him here shortly. But the Rangers win 5-2. Artemi Panarin, after having somewhat of a cold week while Zibanejad was so hot, now it's looking a little different. It's like I want to see these both balanced together, but Breadman had a 3-point game, was fantastic. He's just been lights out all year long. Currently on the season has 36 points in 26 games, I believe. So 10 points over the amount of games he's played. Capo Kakko had a beautiful goal as well, gained his 5th of the season. Adam Fox, a goal, and then Buchnevich, and those guys were the main contributors by far in that game. Just an overall fantastic performance by the Rangers. Did not let the Capitals really get too much light of day and actually gain some key scoring chances. So I loved what I saw that, and Igor played on his head. So that's great. But then when you get into game 36, the Rangers and Sabres, that one was a little bit of a frustrating one just because it felt like that game should have been closed out. So Rangers, again, absolutely dominated the Sabres that entire game. They over doubled them in shots, it would seem. It was ridiculous. And they had a fantastic performance too. Breadman continued to stay hot in that game in particular and would continue that all throughout the week. Even though he had only 1 assist. But Blackwell got on the score sheet again for the Rangers, which was always great to see. And then Philip Hedl gained his 7th goal of the year. A nice little chip right over. It almost looked like the defender because there was a little scrum in front of the net. And then he just picked the corner in the left side perfectly to get through. And then that ended up being the 2nd goal for the Rangers. But then, unfortunately, Tage Thompson, who would end up being an issue for the Rangers this past week, scores in the last minute of the game as the Rangers were so close to closing this one out. It gets past Igor. He was screened. He couldn't see it. It was something that I wish he could have had because it didn't seem like he had too heavy of a screen in front of him. But at the end of the day, it didn't seem like he saw the puck. So then they go to overtime, and Mika Zibanejad scores on a one-timer from Panarin on the 2-on-1, and they were dead. That was definitely towards the end of their shift. So there wasn't a whole lot going right in the dying minute or so, I believe, of overtime. So Zibanejad scores on the 1-2 from a beautiful pass from Panarin on the saucer, and then that wins it. And now we get to our past game, which was just last night at the time of recording this. So probably 2 days for when you guys see this is going to be the Sabres again. Another strong game by the Rangers. It was definitely a little bit more level-headed from the Sabres and the Rangers side of things. Rangers continued to actually press it and got really close to winning this one again. Philip Hedl with another goal. Hedl has really stood out. Hedl didn't have a goal. He had a goal on the Capitals and the Sabres game. But this one, Panarin was the entire game by far. 2 goals, just beautiful setups, everything about him. And Foxy continues to look fantastic. On the 2nd goal for Panarin, which was in the left dot, Fox with a beautiful cross-ice pass there in the offensive zone, which we have seen more and more this past couple weeks as he is starting to get up there in the point column for the Rangers, not just looking like a star defensively. But awesome stuff there. But Victor Olofsson scores in the 3rd period for the Sabres, and then they head to overtime. Overtime, we can definitely gripe about a little bit just because of the amount of time that was given to guys versus not given to others. Then they go to the shootout, and then the Sabres end up winning it. So all in all, the Rangers have a positive week, 2-1 in the process. The 3 top scorers this past week for the Rangers were Artemi Panarin, who was just lights out. You know, when you think of the best actual acquisitions the Rangers have had for this club through free agency, or at least through some type of deal, you know, outside of Messier and some others, Panarin definitely looks like the best since Jágr, and there's a lot of arguments to say who has been the better player through their first couple years with the Rangers. Jágr was lights out on a team where there was really no other help around him, and Panarin is kind of similar, at least for his first year. He's been just phenomenal since day one, and he's not skipping a beat. So I'm obsessed with him. We all are by now. Breadman, but he led the team with 7 points the past 3 games. Then Adam Fox had 4 points the past 3, coming off of a phenomenal week, being first star of the week in the NHL with awesome performances with his points still. And then Strome and Hedl tied for the 3rd spot with 2 points apiece. So what's your initial stance on just the overall past week of games for the Rangers, if you want to expand on anything further? And Igor as well went 2-1 this past week, played all games at a save percentage of .928. Really stood on his head. I can't complain about Igor really one bit.
I think, unfortunately, the injury is going to cost Igor Shesterkin the Calder this season. If he has played the entire season, he's up there in the conversation with Kirill Kaprizov. He's one of the best young goalies in the world, maybe even the best age 25 and under. But yeah, Panarin, I mean, what can we say about Panarin? He has played 95 games now, I think. Only 23 of those games, he had 0 points. And I think 40 out of those 95 games, he had a multi-point game.
Which is unheard of. When you try to wrap that around your head.
That is just ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy with how Panarin has been performing. He is currently 3rd on the all-time Rangers list for points in their first 100 games with the team, trailing only Mark Messier and Jaromir Jágr. He still has 5 games to work on that. Messier had 137 points in 100 games. Jágr 133 in 100, and Artemi Panarin at the moment 131 in 95 games.
Yep.
So he has 5 games left, and he's 6 points behind Mark Messier.
Wow.
But, I mean, what else can we say about Panarin? Best free agent signing ever. It's not even close. I think the second best free agent signing in Rangers history has to be Gaborik. But Panarin is, like, Gaborik's nowhere near Panarin. I think what I've seen the last 2 seasons of Artemi Panarin is the best single-player performance ever in my lifetime. I have a hard time putting him ahead of Jágr, but I think, considering how he's been playing and how easy he makes it look, I'm going to give the nod slightly to Panarin. Yeah, it's unbelievable what he's doing. You know, even when he has a bad game, he had a bad game against, was it the Capitals, where he ended up with 3 points?
Yeah. Was it? Yeah, I think
he had a really bad game. He was almost invisible the first 2 periods, and he ends up with 3 points anyway. It's ridiculous.
And I think that's a great point to just add on in regards to Panarin, because if you remember him, like in the first couple weeks of the year when the Rangers were really, up and down, just the structure wasn't there. They were trying to find their groove. A lot of things were going wrong. Breadman, in my mind, looked like he was a little behind, at least with his step. He didn't look like that he was fully ready. But even then, even while he had somewhat of a slow start just from the eye test, he was still putting up at least, 1 to 2 points a game. He is just naturally going to be one of those guys like the McDavids, like the McKinnons, like the Crosbys in the world, where even on their off nights, you're still expected to at least get a point out of them, and then they're going to have some games where they're just completely snake bitten for whatever reason, get a bunch of shots on net or beautiful setups, and it just doesn't happen because you have a hot goaltender or something. So, absolute hats off to Breadman. He has been the face of this franchise since he landed here. And what did you want to add on to that?
The other player that really needs a shout out here, and he should be in the Norris conversation. It's not even a debate.
100%.
Adam Fox. We gave up 2 second-round picks for this kid, and I will say that it's probably one of Jeff Gordon's best trades. Even though he was planning on signing with the Rangers as a free agent anyway, doesn't matter. We got him a year early. He got used to playing on the Rangers, playing in the NHL, and now he's, in my opinion, a Norris finalist in his second full season in the NHL, second season. He is tied with Victor Hedman in points. And I don't understand how a guy like Drew Doughty gets votes, but Adam Fox doesn't. And I feel the biggest the biggest challenge for Adam Fox that he has to overcome is the stigma of him not being a top 10 pick. If you look at guys like,
we talked about that plenty.
I'm a huge Kale McCarr fan. You know, he's one of the best young defensemen in the league, and he's probably going to win a Norris or two. He should be up there in the conversation, top 5 defenseman in the league this season, in my opinion. But he was a 4th overall pick, so he's going to get that recognition. Drew Doughty, 2nd overall pick, is going to get that recognition. Victor Hedman, same, 2nd overall pick. Quinn Hughes, 7th or 8th overall pick in 2018. He gets the recognition, you know.
7th.
Sorry?
Hughes was 7th, I believe.
Yeah, and then Adam Boqvist was 8th. Okay. Yeah. So he's going to get that recognition as a top 10 pick. But for Adam Fox being drafted 66th overall in the 3rd round, he's going to have to win people over because he doesn't have that draft pedigree, unfortunately, that a lot of people look at. And other guys that another guy that had to overcome that, for instance, is John Klingberg, who really came out of nowhere. And Roman Josi was, I think, a 2nd round pick. He had to sort of prove himself a little bit more. But when you are a top 10 pick, you have a lot more leeway. You get a lot more of a leash by these people that vote for these individual trophies. I've never been a fan of trophies that are based on voting because it's so but Adam Fox should be in the conversation this year, and he's definitely going to be in the conversation next year. And I would be shocked if he doesn't win a Norris as a Ranger. He's the best defenseman I've seen in a blue shirt since Brian Leach, and it's not even close.
Yeah, and you're right.
Fox, if I have to compare Adam Fox to Ryan McDonagh, it's not even close. Ryan McDonagh had one stellar year, 2013-14. He was amazing. He was up there with the best in the league that year, but he didn't really build on that. And part of that is how this team was constructed and how this team was forced to play. But I think Adam Fox is going to be a much better defenseman than Ryan McDonagh as a Ranger. And this team is slowly coming together, and it's just exciting to see. And we're finally getting to see players getting the minutes that they need to develop. You know, you see Capo Caco getting 14, 15 minutes, Kravtsov in his debut, 10 minutes. I like where this team is headed now, and I'm happy at the turnaround the team, upper management, and the people behind the bench have made in the last couple of weeks.
No, I agree with you. And it's interesting that you bring up Ryan McDonagh, because I think, myself, I absolutely love Mac Truck. And I thought that while maybe he wasn't the biggest vocal leader during his time as captain, I thought it was very fitting for him. When you look back at the Rangers playoff runs, coming back in the Capitals series, all these different things just have always stood out to me about Mac Truck. The trade made sense when it happened and everything. I'm so happy he won a Stanley Cup this past year. Hats off to him. Nothing wrong with Mac whatsoever. I always be a huge supporter of his, but you're right. When he came to the Rangers, it was a little slow going, and then he started to propel. Was a guy that we would have as a power play quarterback at times, but wasn't that kind of power play quarterback that they would then bring in a Keith Yandel and others, guys that are more known for their offensive specialty, versus Mac, who really is prioritizing, being a stronghold in his own zone, blocking plenty of shots, similar to Girardi in a lot of aspects, but more of speed and was more two-way, more balanced. But Foxy, since he has taken the jump into the league with the Rangers, it has been a completely different story. They're two different players. Fox has been easily one of the best. I said this when I look back on my rankings, because I did a top 10 defenseman rankings last season. I had Adam Fox in my top 10. I believe I had him right at 10 for that matter, or I had him at 9. When you look at his numbers, when you look at his advanced statistics outside of his actual point production, he was a top player in the league. Defensively speaking, he was second in defense. I believe he was second or third, actually, in all among defensemen in takeaway giveaway ratio. He was a positive. He was, I believe he was a positive of like +1 or 2, around 40 or so giveaway takeaways. So he was already stellar as it is. And this year, I'm sure the numbers back that up even more. He's taking that next level. He's getting the credit he deserves and just taking advantage of the opportunities given to him now. As we said last week and weeks prior, not having Tony D in the way of getting more power play time as well. Looked a little slow at first on the power play, but definitely is picking up. He's top 5 in the league in points on the power play with 18, I believe. He's second in the league. I think he might even threw out these numbers, if I'm not mistaken, on Twitter, or maybe it was just the Rangers stat page, but second in the league currently in assists among defensemen with 28. He's just been stellar, or maybe he's first. Either way, he's just been phenomenal. I'm loving everything about Fox, and I'm loving to see these guys actually starting to grow here. And I think this is also another great segue, as long as you find what to talk about, again, Vitaly Kravtsov, because he's the man of the hour. Finally had his debut yesterday. I was saying it feels like yesterday when I was watching actually at a family friend's wedding on my phone for a second, the draft, trying to see who the Rangers are going to get 9th overall. They don't get Oliver Wahlstrom. They get Vitaly Kravtsov. I was luckily able to know a decent amount about him because I was watching plenty of scouting reports and reading articles on the draft coming up and who are guys sneaky that we could expect maybe in the top 10. He was one of them. So I was fine with that pick. I know a lot of Rangers fans weren't, but I think we're soon going to realize why this was a strong pick for the Rangers in the end, if we haven't already. Had just around 10 minutes or so of ice time, which is more because I believe you predicted right around 8 or at least under 8 on Twitter. So it's nice to see him get at least 10. The third line, again, didn't have too much going on. Hito and Lafreniere, they didn't get all that much ice time, and it's something that we hope to see more going forward as Quinn builds more comfortability with them. But I'm perfectly fine with that being a young kid line for now. As much as I like Julien Gauthier, and I believe he's deserving of game playing time, you can't put Kravtsov on the 4th line. You just can't. Even if guys like Rooney and Blackwell are actually playing above expectations and decent, it's just not something you can do because you're going to forget about him at the end of the day. You know, Quinn always views the 4th line as the 4th line. A lot of times he just forgets about the guys, I feel like. So last thing you want to do is throw him there. But I thought he was fine. He had a couple shots on net. I think he had 3 shots on net, actually, and had some good looks. Looked strong with his body. You can tell he was a little timid at first, just trying to get situated, but he also didn't really have any long shifts either. So it was hard for him to kind of get adjusted right away from what I saw, but I like him a lot. I've always been a huge fan of Vitaly, and I'm really excited to see how he's going to break out, if at all, with the Rangers in their final. How many games do they have left going on? They have, just under 20, it looks like. So there's time for him to grow as long as he stays in the lineup. That's what matters to me. But what is the main takeaway that you had from Vitaly's debut, if anything?
First of all, I was happy he got to play 10 minutes in a close game.
Yes.
When the game was 2-1 in the third, I didn't really, and this is because of how things progressed over the season. I didn't expect to see the Kravtsov line out there a lot, but they were out there. You know, they got their shifts in the third period. Kravtsov was really close to scoring the game winner with 2 minutes to go. Unbelievable save by Olmark. And I think he looked okay. He wasn't great. He still needs to adjust a little bit to the pace of the game, and that's the biggest adjustment. You know, I don't buy that he has to get used to the smaller rink, like Joe Micheletti said a couple of times during the game, which I like to correct here, by the way, because Joe Micheletti kept talking about the bigger rinks in the KHL. A big portion of the rinks in the KHL are actually the same size as NHL rinks this season. So it's not necessarily that he has to get used to the NHL rink size. It's that he has to get used to the way they play in the NHL. It's a little bit faster. It's a little bit more physical. It's a little bit more built on territory instead of possession. If you look at KHL teams, and this is a similar thing that Buchnevich had to get used to. When Buchnevich started in the NHL, if he got to the red line and there were no teammates with him, he would circle back, wait for his teammates to complete the line change, and then rush up the ice with them. Whereas in the NHL, we're sort of used to dumping the puck and then on the forecheck putting pressure on your opponent. It's more like football. It's more like the NFL, where if you don't get the 10 yards on third down, you punt it away. Mm-hmm. You know, and dumping the puck for me is the equivalent of punting the ball in football.
Can I expand on that for just 1 second? Because you're 100% right. It's something that I've really never understood. Like you understand the premise behind dumping the puck to give you a good chance of getting into the offensive zone. But especially when you have guys where, say, there's a clear odd man rush or a 3-on-2 or something, and you're not at the end of your shift, and then you still just dump it around, because in my mind, it almost shows a lack of confidence or just the amount of muscle memory that these players have since they were little kids in Pee Wee. You know, it's something you're always taught, right? Because it's part of the game. But there's so many situations where I'm like, it really would have made sense for them to just break out and actually make a rush out of this thing. Mm-hmm. It's not like that they were at the dying seconds of their shift, you know? And I feel like there's some of the best players in the league that we see offensively are ones where you're not constantly seeing them dumping the puck like that. Yeah. They're always driving into the offensive zone. So you're right. It does kind of baffle me. I understand the reasoning, but I don't think it adds up nearly as much as what it should on a game-by-game basis.
No, and I think the whole dumping the puck and putting pressure on the forecheck, the punting tactic, works a lot better on NHL rinks because traditionally, yes, they are smaller than European rinks, but now over the last couple of years, you've seen a change. The Finnish league has gone with a hybrid rink, which is a little bit wider than NHL rinks, but not Olympic size rinks. The KHL is going to North American style rinks, and more countries are adopting these smaller rink sizes now. But the thought process behind it for these European players is still the same. They don't dump the puck because traditionally on those larger rinks, putting pressure on the forecheck doesn't work. There's just too much ice to cover, Mm-hmm. So imagine playing football on a field that's twice the width. How are you going to cover a punt? It's a lot harder to do when you only have 11 people, but your field is a lot wider. It's a lot harder to do. So when you see these European players get to the NHL, their instincts are not to dump the puck. Their instincts are, oh, there's no one here with me. Let's circle back and let's rush up the ice when they finish their line change. And I saw Kravtsov do that a lot in 2019 when he played in the preseason. And that was, I think, one of Quinn's biggest criticisms. He wasn't executing the game plan that they had. And then he went to Hartford. It didn't really work out. He went back to Russia and then came back to Hartford. And now he played in the KHL full season. And I think the transition this time will be a little bit easier, both on and off the ice, because it's his second time coming over. But he just needs to get used to, what's needed in the NHL and what the coach wants. And Buchnevich is doing that a little bit more now than he did in 2016 when he made his NHL debut. But at the same time, I feel like it has become more of a routine for NHL players. And what you brought up, they dump the puck even when they shouldn't. When you have a clear opportunity to rush to the net and get a scoring opportunity, sometimes you see these players still dumping the puck and going for a line change. It's become a habit and not like a thought out decision to dump the puck. Mm-hmm. But that's a debate we can have another day, because I can talk about that for 45 minutes. Yeah. But Kravtsov in his debut, in possession, he looked really good. I think defensively he looked a tad slow, but it is a higher pace than the KHL, and he just has to get used to it. Nothing to worry about. But he wasn't a liability in his NHL debut, which for a 21-year-old kid I think is huge. At the end of the day, I just want him to get a couple of games in this season. I don't expect him to score like 10 goals and get 5 assists. If he gets 10 points in the final 20 games, that's like a half a point per game pace. That would be huge. I'm not even expecting that, but I just wanted to get a couple of goals in, contribute a little bit on the score sheet and get that confidence that he needs to build on. But yeah, this team is looking good, man. There's so many young kids now on this team in Fox and Miller and Lindgren and Hedel and Kako, Lafreniere, Kravtsov, Gauthier. Julien Gauthier, we don't really talk about Julien Gauthier a lot as still a prospect, but he's a rookie. He's eligible for the Calder this year.
And just because he's been, we know the story, but he's taken his dear sweet time. Originally drafted in first round 2016, dominated the AHL. Couldn't ask for more from him at that level. It's just about putting it together now, and that's why I've been such a big advocate of his. So to get more ice time.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out here is that development isn't linear. You cannot just use a sheet and go, okay, this is how I want this player to develop because this other player developed this way. It just doesn't work that way. Some players develop a little bit later. Some players have a higher development curve early on and then even out at a lower ceiling. You never know where a player is going to end up in their development. You never know how it's going to go. There's also a lot of external factors to take into consideration here. If you look at a guy like Sean Day that the Rangers drafted in 2016 in the 3rd round, he was granted exceptional status in the OHL. 15 years old, was allowed into the league. And then he had some issues going on. I think his brother ended up in prison.
Yes, yeah, it's an unbelievably unfortunate story where it's like kind of what could have been. You know,
it is really unfortunate. And you know, if you're going to make a movie about the life of a hockey player, I think Sean Day's life would be a lot more interesting than Sidney Crosby's.
Yeah, if you look at given the hardships and you know how all the previous expectation, you know, because again, exceptional status. If you look at all the guys that have been given exceptional status, none of them, for the most part, are not well known in the NHL, to put it lightly. You know.
Yeah. The first couple were really good, like John Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, Sidney Crosby, and then you got guys like Sean Day and Joe Veleno, who's not a bad player, but he's nowhere near Tavares or McDavid. But if you look at Sean Day, you know, his ceiling at age 15, 16 was huge. He was in the conversation to be a top 3 pick. And then some external factors happen, and that changes the development curve of a player. You know, external factors matter, and not everyone deals with adversity the same way. Some players just brush it off and become all-time greats. You know, they use it to fuel their desire to get to the top, and others cannot let go of those burdens. So to expect players to develop at the same rate every time is just unfair. It just takes a little bit more time for some players. And a guy like Adam Fox comes into the league at age 21 is a little bit different than a guy like Kaapo Kakko coming into the league at age 18, coming over from Finland, adjusting to life in a new country where he barely speaks the language. He doesn't know anything. You know, they're put up with billet families, which helps a little bit, but it doesn't really take every concern away. You never really know what's going through a prospect's mind, and looking at Julien Gauthier, he's 22. Maybe it takes him another year or two to get to where he can actually be a top 6 player. You never know how long it's going to take. Chris Kreider, you remember Chris Kreider in 2012 in the playoffs?
Yes. That's what I literally fell in love with him from game one. Yeah,
that was 3 years after he was drafted, so he was 21 years old. Then he had a great postseason with the Rangers, and then the following season, which was the shortened season because of the lockout, he was struggling in the NHL a little bit, and he was sent down to Hartford, or as they were known then, the Connecticut Whale.
Yep.
And he was really struggling to put things together in his second season. Then he came up in 2013-14, the year that we made the Cup run, and he was just a different player. By that time, he was already 22, 23 years old. You know, so maybe Julien Gauthier will hit the ground running next season or the year after that when he's 22, 23, 24 years old. Having him as part of the young core and having some other kids, you know, knocking on the door now with Nils Lundqvist and Braden Schneider and Matthew Robertson and Zach Jones, who had an amazing year in college. And this is such an exciting rebuild. I'm ready for 2024-25 when we are going to be dominating the league.
Yeah, let's speed it up. All right, let's get to the fun stuff, shall we? But at the same time, it is important to pay attention to these building years and actually knowing what you have and just being a part of, you know, it almost feels like I know that you've said how personal of attachment you've gone to either Niels or Kravtsov or these other players, not just because of the personal interactions you've had, but just following them since day one. We're talking before even these guys are drafted with a lot of them. I've experienced that as I've been following hockey more and more and actually doing my own content and things. And it's such a great feeling. And I think once we actually get to the point of this rebuild kind of being over and consistent playoff and eventually cup contenders, it's going to just be, it's going to be so, it's not even bittersweet. It's just such a great feeling knowing that you've been a part of this since day one. It feels like you're right along that ride with them because you really are. And that's what being a fan is all about at the end of the day, making sure that you're with them through their highs and their lows and everything in between. But I want to expand a little bit further here on, you know, Kravtsov and Julien Gauthier and their utilization going forward. Because if you look at Gauthier, is he going to be protected because he is not disqualified, if you will, from being picked up in the expansion draft coming up after this season? So what is your stance on Gauthier? Do you think that he will be protected without an issue now that guys like Lemieux are gone now and some others? Or do you think that there's still some uncertainty there? Because my only concern really with Gauthier is I want him to be getting steadily third-line minutes. And when you look at this current roster construction, you simply can't do it with Vitali in the mix now. which I understand, rightfully so. But how does a future outlook present itself with Gauthier with this club unless Quinn really starts to roll all four lines well? But at that point, it's like, okay, what is your fourth line going to be? Maybe in a year, do we have, if it's not, say, Blackwell, maybe a more Morgan Barron, if you will, or some of the youngsters that we have in the AHL step up, and you actually get a pretty consistent 1 through 4. But when you look at history and with the Rangers and the NHL, normally your fourth line is just not as utilized to the same extent as your third line. It isn't natural in today's game, unfortunately, when it should be, in my opinion. So what's your stance on all that?
Yeah, I think it depends on how your fourth line is constructed. If your fourth line is constructed like the Islanders do, with guys like Clutterbuck and Komarov and Cizikas and Martin, then your fourth line has one purpose. Your fourth line is there to provide a spark, to bring some energy. And this season, Martin has been potting some goals, which is surprising. But then again, the Islanders are one of the top teams in the league. As much as it pains Ranger fans to admit it, they are this season. Or you can have the fourth line that the Rangers had in 2014 when we made it all the way to the final. Our fourth line that season was Brian Boyle, Dominic Moore, and Derek Dorsett. It wasn't just a high energy line. It was also a skilled line. You can have a skilled fourth line. And if you have a skilled fourth line, it gives you so much more depth. I wouldn't be opposed to having a fourth line where Rooney is the center, Gauthier plays on the right, and Morgan Barron or Justin Richards or maybe Patrick Kodorenko makes a push, replaces Colin Blackwell on that fourth line, or maybe one of them plays center and Rooney switches to the left. The Rangers have options, and Julien Gauthier, I think, is going to be protected because he holds more value on the trade market than Colin Blackwell or Kevin Rooney. I think that's why he will be protected. And even if they don't want him long term, you still protect him in the expansion draft because you can get something for him in a trade afterwards. Because the trade deadline is probably going to be a little bit of a dud in the final few days leading up to the trade deadline because of the expansion draft. It really changed the way general managers look at trading players because they got burned 4 years ago. A lot of people say that the Vegas Golden Knights were handed a cup contending team by the league. They were handed a cup contending team, but it wasn't by the league. It was by general managers making stupid decisions. When the Anaheim Ducks are giving away Shea Theodore so they can keep Josh Manson, you cannot really blame Gary Bettman for that. General managers were put in a position where they knew 2-3 years ahead of time what the expansion draft rules were, how many players they could protect, and what the requirements were. They knew 2-3 years in advance, and they still got burned. The Florida Panthers gave them Jonathan Marchessault if they would pick Riley Smith. All of a sudden, that's like 2/3 of your top line in your first year where you make it all the way to the Cup final. Yeah. So, the Vegas Golden Knights showed what you can do. And general managers are going to be a little hesitant, I think, at the trade deadline next week. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is how I see it. And a guy like Julien Gauthier will probably be protected and maybe traded in the summer for a better return because there's not this expansion draft looming that handcuffs general managers anymore. Or they keep Julien Gauthier and they go with a more skilled line. The way they played yesterday, I think was the ice time was divided pretty good between the third and fourth line. The lowest time on ice, like we said, was Vitaly Kravtsov at even strength, 10 minutes. I think you can do that for a couple of games and just see where things go. What I was worried about at first is that we're going back to a fourth line that has Brendan Lemieux and then Brett Howden and then some enforcer or something. But it looks like those days are behind us now. I hope they go with a skilled fourth line that plays 9, 10, 11 minutes, with the third line playing 9, 10, 11 minutes, and then have the top six play the bulk of the other minutes.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that you're right. Fourth line construction will probably be the biggest thing. So I'm very curious to see how the Rangers are going to go about that. Because again, Gauthier is a guy that I think that there still is plenty of potential there. We've been seeing the flashes. It's been more relevant lately than earlier in the season. But yeah, give him the security. continue throwing him out there, give him at least 10 minutes a night, and just see how he does. We're seeing the speed, we're seeing the playmaking, and he just is a monster. He's a horse on that puck, and I really think that you have all the raw tools. Now it's just a matter of gaining that experience to really put it all together still. So keep an eye out.
He's been a really good player since he came back from that healthy scratch.
You're right.
He's been a good possession player. He's driving offense. He's drawing penalties. He's doing everything that's expected of him.
Yeah, and he absolutely deserves, in my opinion, to stay with this club for the foreseeable future. As long as no one full on beats him for a spot as another younger player, right? So Gauthier, keep an eye on him. I hope that the future is in his favor with the New York Rangers. But now let's get on here to the upcoming week of games for the Rangers, because they have a fairly tough schedule. Now when we look at their current construction in the standings, they're just 4 points out of a playoff spot, so 2 wins. They're tied with the Flyers right out of the playoff spot. The Bruins currently have 44 points at the time of recording this. So upcoming week is not going to fare the Rangers well, but hopefully that they try to take the most advantage out of it possible. If you look at them, they're going to be facing off Tuesday against the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team that has had the upper hand on the Rangers this season, which is frustrating because a lot of those games could have really went either way, and the Rangers just fell short earlier in the year. Then you get the Penguins again. Both games are at home on Thursday, and then they have a back-to-back. Then they are off to the island to face off against the Islanders, and then again against the Islanders away on Sunday. So just to give you guys a heads up, I'm assuming as long as it's fine with you, we'll probably have to record next episode if possible, maybe on Saturday, just because I'm going to be out of town Sunday for basically a good portion of the week. So I think it'd be best if we record Saturday. So let's talk about those 3 games in particular, excluding the Sunday game against the Islanders. So what would your next 3-game prediction be?
Well, first of all, have you seen how many Tuesday games we have in April?
A lot. It looks like a lot. Every single Tuesday.
We play every single Tuesday in April, which makes me happy because, and again, I might be completely off here, but you know how people always talk about Kako Tuesday, hashtag Kako Tuesday, which is a wordplay on Kako Tuesday. I looked it up. Kako has scored 15 goals in the NHL, and 6 of those 15, so 40%, have been scored on Tuesday. So awesome. With 4 Tuesday games coming up in April, let's see how many he can pot.
That's a guaranteed 4 goals, right? That's how I'm looking at it.
It has to be, yes. Maybe an empty netter to make it 5 in 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
No, but 2 games against the Penguins. The Penguins are still a better team than the Rangers. If they can come away with 2 points there, either 2 overtime losses or a win, that would be huge. Islanders are tough to predict. I think they're gonna beat the Islanders, and I think they're gonna come away with a point out of the 2 games against the Penguins. So I'm gonna go 1-1-1.
Okay, all right. Those are good picks. I tend to agree with you. I'm gonna stay with 1-1-1 too. I know that it's fun to have things different, but I feel right along those lines. Or you know what? I don't want to just say 1-2. I'm going 1-1. That was kind of my thought process going into it. So next episode will probably be, I'm sure we'll try to record for Saturday and have that out maybe either Saturday evening or next Sunday earlier in the day before the game. So that way there's plenty of time out. So that's the only reason why we're not doing it on Sunday or Monday next week. But I agree with those predictions. Hopefully it's a positive week for the Rangers. And look, if they go above 500 for the next 3 to 4 games, that could be a game changer. We could find themselves in a playoff spot before we know it. It's really up to them how much they're prioritizing this playoff push and how much they're prioritizing this player development. I think if you can do both, fantastic. Just don't make it black and white is all I ask. Let's get it gray. Let's get it in the middle. Let's not make a clear cut one way or the other. Let's just have a nice blend. That's the best way for this team to succeed, in my opinion. I think you would agree. So any final thoughts here before we close out, Steven?
On the prospect front, there was a change. Hunter Skinner signed an ATO with the Hartford Wolfpack and an entry-level contract with the Rangers. So congratulations to Hunter Skinner. Fully deserved after the stellar season he's had in the ECHL, where he shattered records that have stood for decades. Made his AHL debut and got an assist on Ty Ronning's goal.
Who has actually been performing really well.
Ronning has had a good season, short guy, but maybe one day he'll make his NHL debut. I hope so. Spoke to Ty Ronning a couple of times. it's just fun talking to these prospects and hearing their perspective on, what they expect from their careers. But yeah, Hunter Skinner starting his AHL career on an ATO. He's gonna start his as a pro, getting paid for it next season. Braden Schneider, of course, a couple of weeks ago signed his contract, so he'll be in Hartford. The blue line in Hartford next season is gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to play against. You have on the right side Braden Schneider and Hunter Skinner. On the left side, you have Matthew Robertson, who's a huge, large workhorse. So it's going to be a lot of fun next season. And other than that, Zach Jones made it to the Frozen Four with UMass. So I think they're playing again on Tuesday, but I have to check the exact schedule.
Yeah, he's had a phenomenal season with them.
Yeah. Prospect scheduling is dying down a little bit, until the playoffs pick up in Sweden. But seeing these kids, making their debuts in the AHL and Zach Jones going all the way to the Frozen Four, exciting last couple of weeks of the season.
No, 100%. I'm really looking forward to them. Zach Jones, we've talked about plenty, but he's one of my favorite prospects on this club, and it really has been since they drafted him. I think he's really going to be a sneaky pickup in the end for the Rangers as long as he stays with this organization.
Can I say one final thing before we wrap it up?
It's our podcast. Say whatever you want.
Ryan Strome.
Ryan, that's it. That's the tweet. Ryan Strome.
Look, I'm going to say a lot of people have been complaining about him for 3 years, and every time it was something different. It was either his shooting percentage was too high, or he was playing with Panarin, then he was playing without Panarin, but he was playing with Kreider, who then scored 2 hat tricks. Yeah, maybe Kreider scored 2 hat tricks because he was set up by Ryan Strome. Ryan Strome, until last night, led the team in points. He's been a solid player this season. He's on pace for over 70 points in an 82-game season. The more I think about it, and this is going to be my bold prediction, the more I think about it, I think in 2-3 years, we're still going to have Zibanejad, Strome, and Hedl down the middle.
Ooh, that is a bold prediction. I mean, we'll see. For all we know, the Rangers might acquire a guy by the name of Jack Eichel this offseason. So if they don't do that, we'll see. I like it. You'd rather stay confident with your current club. That's a good thing, right? It's not a bad thing. That means that things are going right for them. But Strome,
if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Yep, you're right. And Strome has been fantastic. I gotta say, give credit where credit's due. That's all I can say. Stromer is really impressing me and proving everybody wrong. And same thing with David Quinn and everyone with this club. That's all we ever hope for as Ranger fans. That if you have a critic here or there, you just want to be we want to be proven wrong. The last thing we want to do is be continuously annoyed or bothered by this certain player or this certain coach. So by all means, Strome, continue to do what you're doing because you're definitely turning the heads of many of us Ranger fans and is not getting overlooked, in my opinion. So hats off to him, and I hope that he continues the streak because when you think of the best second number 2 centers the Rangers have had the past 2 decades, no one really stands out to me other than Derek Brassard. And Brassard's career season, I don't even believe he hit 60 points. Did he? Or maybe it was just over 60.
58 or 59, maybe?
I believe it was right around what Strome did last year because Strome had 59 points. So, yeah, I mean, again, if you just look at that trade, how everything led to that point with Ryan Spooner, it's crazy knowing that the Rangers finally are having depth at the center position. The main gripe that we still have is face-offs with them for sure, but it feels good. Hopefully everything else rounds itself out because when you look at the previous decade or so of this Rangers team having these deep playoff runs, one of their main issues outside of having that number 1 go-to guy offensively was having a number 1 center. Not a shot at Derek Stepan, not a shot at all these guys, but there's a comfortable difference now with Mika and Strome.
I mean, going from Christensen and aging Brad Richards and Stepan and Brassard to now having Zibanejad on your top line and then Ryan Strome behind it, that's great. And the last thing I want to say about Strome, every time I see Ryan Strome, I cannot help but think of Sam Gagner.
Sam Gagner. Maybe in the nose a little bit.
I'm going to tell you why. It has nothing to do with on the ice, but the Edmonton Oilers had Sam Gagner and Jordan Eberle on their team.
Yes, they did.
Then they let Sam Gagner
when they had them.
Then they let Sam Gagner go.
Yep.
Then they traded Jordan Eberle for Ryan Strome.
I see what you're
And
doing.
they traded Ryan Strome for Ryan Spooner, and then they traded Ryan Spooner for Sam Gagner.
Yeah, no, that's fun. I know. Look, Peter Chiarelli. That's just a fun topic for another day. Like, seriously. But no, you're right. You're 100% right. Never forget Sam Gagner's, what was it, 8-point game against Edmonton? All right, I'm getting on
4 goals, 4 assists, I think.
Yeah, I'm getting on a tangent now. We got to stop. But Ryan Strome, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you. And thank you all so much, Rangers fans, for checking out today's episode. I hope you did enjoy. Let us know your thoughts as always. And Steven, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.